Yo, what's up? Today's topic, it was requested by Mosswellen. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But he's one of my followers on Twitter, and he requested for me to do a video on setting the scene. So that is what I'm going to go through with y'all today. Y'all don't have to do everything that I say today in every scene that you write, but here are some good questions and tips and pointers to kind of go over as you're writing your scene. First is, when and where does your scene take place? Is it nighttime? Is it daytime? What's the immediate surrounding look like? Is it in a building? Is it outside? If it's outside, what kind of environment is it in? What kind of trees, animals, whatever? What is the actual setting for your scene? One thing you can do as a writer to intensify the scene is to add similes or metaphors or a personification of something. It really draws your reader in. Now, don't overdo it, because overdoing it will just kind of seem very gimmicky and very boring to read and slow. So do not fill your story with a bunch of similes and metaphors and stuff just to try to enhance your scenes. But some here and there does help intensify them. It does help draw your reader in and really get a grip on them. One suggestion would be not to use similes or metaphors or whatever that isn't really relevant to your story. The time frame, the setting. If it's a fantasy world, you wouldn't make a reference that would have to be in the real world to really understand, like a reference to a city or to an actual celebrity. So you wouldn't want to use that, but you could use something that you had designed and came up with for your world. This goes back to the world building, which if you haven't checked out that video, links below. But when you do the history, there's major events, major rulers, different structures you could add in. But you can make reference to that in a way that the reader would know what that ruler or whatever is and how they are looked upon, and it would be understandable for like a simile or a metaphor or something along those lines. Another point you could do is, how does your character, your point of view character, feel about the scene or setting emotionally? Are they emotionally attached to it? Does the scene have significant meaning to them? Are they walking through an area where they've had something happen to them before in that area that reflects upon their emotion or their personality, something that builds them as a character? Like I said, don't overly do this and make every single scene, a meaning to some degree for your characters. I'm not saying don't make your scenes important. Every scene should be important for your story, but in terms of making your characters have a history or something for every scene, again, that kind of comes off gimmicky and very boring and slow to read and will turn your readers off. But it's still important to add an emotional attachment to the scene and to the setting. I have a scene that I'm going to be writing in my next book of my Metagore series that is one of the characters walking through a graveyard to his mother's grave. So that's kind of got that emotional attachment to the character. So stuff like that can really draw emotional attachment to a scene or setting for your novel. Just do not do it in every scene. Along with feeling things emotionally, are they able to physically feel things? I'm not talking about, reaching out and touching the camera or anything. I'm talking about, is it hot? Are they sweating? Is it very thick and humid? Is it raining? How's the ground that they're walking on? Is it very rough? Is it smooth? Is it windy? Stuff blowing into their face, grits of sand, dirt, debris, What are they physically feeling? As well as feeling things, either emotionally or physically, you also want to make sure you're touching on all the other senses as well. So are they hearing anything? Are they in a crowded area? Is there a lot of people? Are they out in the wilderness? Do they hear the rustling of leaves, branches? Can they hear the wind howling? If it's raining, can they hear the rain beating on the roof or on the ground or whatever? Do they hear animals or wildlife or something in the background? Take in all the other senses, not just sights and feeling, but hearing. Also, as well as being in a place that reminds them of something, does the sounds sound like something, if they're in a foreign land, and they hear people speaking their language or their dialect or something, that could bring back memories of some sort, a song or a lullaby or something, a particular saying somebody says, could remind them of when they was little, or of a family member or friend that used to say something very similar to it. What attachment do they have to sounds that they could possibly be hearing? As well as the voices, as I said, sounds and dialect and stuff, what are the voices like? This isn't as much as an attachment or a remembrance of it, but to set the scene, how does the characters talk if there's dialogue? And most scenes have at least a little bit of dialogue, even if it's internal, if it's a first person point of view and it's just a lot of thought. That thought should be in dialogue, and they should be able to hear the voice as they speak, or at least how they hear themselves. So how is the dialogue, how is the voices sound? Is it very scratchy? Is it very drowned? Is it nasally? Is it high pitch? Is it chiming? How does the sound of their voice or others' voices, sound? How does it come across? Besides just describing a voice and how they sound to your main character, how are other characters' facial expressions? How are they acting? Their body language sets the scene just as much as the actual scenery around them does. It really gives a mood. Your characters could be in a lovely garden, hear birds chirping, everything. But if a dramatic event just happened, or something that the actual point of view character doesn't know happened, and they meet another character, their actions will kind of set that tone. And that will actually set your scene just as much as, other descriptions or similes or metaphors or attachments emotionally or whatever. They tell the story, I've always heard a person's body language says more than the words. And that's true when it comes to writing as well. And it's not just other characters, it's also your main character or your point of view character. What are they physically doing? Their body language says more than what their words could ever say, as well as eternal thought. If it's first person point of view, what they're thinking is more setting the scene and actually how they are reacting than what their actual outward appearance or words towards another character actually says. So that really sets the scene. It really gets the emotional connection with your character established with your reader. And as well as internal thought, what is your main character or your point of view character thinking? What are they remembering when they go to these places? If they are remembering something, as I said earlier, what is that event? Use this as an opportunity to showcase their backstory or the history of your character or of a certain particular scene or setting in their background that's not in the story. It doesn't have to be linear timeline here. You can jump back in time and kind of show a flashback in a sense to really capture the moment. Now, like I said at the beginning, do not do all of these in every scene because it will just get tedious and very gimmicky. So do not do that on every scene, but maybe once or twice in the book to do something like that is okay. And back to your main senses. What are your characters smelling? If they're in town, are they smelling food, baked goods? Are they smelling manure? Are they smelling flowers and aroma? Is there something dead around? They smell that rotting flesh. If something's burning, are they smelling that? What are they smelling? As well as everything else, what does the smell remind them of? There's a song by 21 Pilots. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but it basically mentions smelling something that reminds them of their childhood, and they could just capture it and make it into a candle. They would sell it. Probably nobody would buy it, but that's something that reminded them of their childhood. Just as simple as a smell. As well as if the scent is very strong, a lot of times you can actually taste something. If you are smelling food, you can kind of taste it in your mouth, and your mouth starts watering for it. As well as if they're actually physically eating in the book. What does the food that they are eating taste like to them? You could say they're eating chicken. Okay, what does it taste like to them? There's different type of chicken, different seasonings. Is it juicy? Is it dry? Do they enjoy it? Some people don't. Are they a vegetarian? They are disgusted with it but they are for some reason having to eat chicken or something. You know, what semblance is it to them as a person or a character? Another point is the conflict in the scene. Almost every scene needs some form of conflict, whether it's a physical conflict, an internal conflict, a force of nature type conflict. You know, what kind of conflict is it, and how is it affecting your character in this scene? What kind of conflict is it? It doesn't even have to be a conflict. It could be like a triumphant victory or revelation or something, but some type of actual plot driving factor needs to be in the chapter or in the scene. Sometimes you can think about, you know, how does it tie into the overall story? You know, what is the theme in a sense of the book, and you know, how is that displayed in the scene, and how could you display it? You know, if it's more of a darker story like horror or suspense, you know, you want that kind of reflected in the scene. You don't want it too out of place. There are exceptions here and there, but overall you want it to be close to the same theme as your actual story is itself. So that's something else you can think of. And along with your conflict, you know, what exactly is your character wanting to get out of the scene? You know, what's their expectations? It doesn't have to be exactly what happens, but how are they approaching the scene? Back to emotionally, you know, how are they invested? How are they connected? You know, how are they indulging themselves in the scene? And lastly, are there any opportunities for you to incorporate foreshadowing into your scene? Now, I know not every scene will allow you to incorporate it, but if you could do that in your scenes, if it will allow you to foreshadow future events, do it. That is like the most satisfying thing as an author, is to write foreshadowing in, especially if you do it very minorly. Like you just kind of hint at things here and there, and your reader doesn't really pick up on that it's actually foreshadowing. It also gives your book rereadability. But yeah, that's it for today. All my links are below. You can go find me on Facebook, Twitter. I got a Patreon account, Instagram, Pinterest, obviously YouTube. So just click subscribe, whichever side it's on, I don't really know. But so subscribe and click the bell to get notifications every Monday whenever I post a new video. And thanks again to Moss Wellen for suggesting this video. And if there's a video y'all would like me to make over a certain topic, it could be basically anything involving writing or my experience or whatever, I guess. Just hit me up and I'll see what I can do. But yeah, that's it. Yelly.